This show is not intended for the politically correct or the closed-minded. Enter at the risk of opening your eyes. You have been warned.
Why does the media attack an issue? To get primetime ratings?
In my line of work, you got to keep repeating things over and over and over again for the truth to sink in.
The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
A moment comes when we step out from the old to the new, and when the soul of a nation, long suppressed, finds utterance.
To kind of catapult the propaganda.
You are listening to Open Eyes with your host, Ira Robinson. From the normal to the paranormal, from government cover-ups to the depths of our consciousness, we aim to explore all things. From the dawn of prehistory to current events, no topic is forbidden and nothing remains hidden.
No more secrets.
Open your eyes and open your mind to the fact that life as we know it is not as we have been taught. Join us at LateNightInTheMidlands.com or OpenEyesNetwork.com as we take this brief journey through the depths of the cosmos and explore what it really means to be human.
Many peoples have sacrificed their liberties, only to learn to their sorrow that deceit and mockery, poverty and tyranny are their reward.
Whether you're online or offline, intercontinental or intergalactic, hello and welcome to Open Eyes. Oh my goodness, it has been a trip from hell to get on live tonight, but we are live and we are in person with you, and you can give a call in tonight if you want to. The number, as always, is 260-494-3937. That's 260-494-EYES. You can also reach us in the chat room over at LNMRadioNetwork.com as always. And we're also live streaming onto YouTube at youtube.com/C/Open Eyes Network. I have a guest with me tonight. I'll bring him on here in just a few moments, but I just wanted to explain real quick. The late start happened because of some serious technical difficulties. Right when I was getting ready to start the show, my computer decided to not allow me to run the audio program that I use to do the show with. So I went on ahead and just did a quick reboot. And as I did the reboot, it decided that it wanted to do an update. Then it got frozen on the update and I got the thing rebooted from there. And after I got done rebooting it, got everything all set up and ready to go again, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, my computer decides to freeze completely. Had to reboot again, had to try to get everything set up again. So hopefully we will remain intact from this point forward. It has been hell, but that's okay. We're here. We're with you guys. And yeah, it's just been a journey. So my guest tonight is Keith DeCandido, and he is an amazing author. He's written over 50 books, dozens of short stories, lots of nonfiction stuff as well. He's worked with some really big intellectual properties, and we are going to bring him on right now. I do believe he's there with us. Keith, are you still there with us?
Hello?
Hello, Keith. Welcome to the show.
Sorry. Everything was fine, and then it faded out for a second.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, my last name is pronounced DeCandido. I should have said
DeCandido.
that.
Okay, I gotcha. I was wondering if I was mispronouncing that. I'm notorious for mispronouncing.
Everybody gets it wrong. It is the story of my life has been correcting people mispronouncing my last name. I'm used to it by now, but still, it is in fact DeCandido.
All righty, that'll work. I'll do that good from now on, I think. Hopefully. But anyways, Keith, you've worked with some really big things out there, and I want to give you a chance to give you a little bit of a bio room here. I always feel that it's best to let the guests give their own bio because they're a lot better at knowing their own lives than I am. So why don't you give a little bit of info about yourself and your background and where you're coming from with things?
Well, I was raised by a roving pack of itinerant librarians. I seriously, my parents were librarians. They're retired now, but and they started reading to me at a very young age, and then I was reading on my own at a fairly young age. So, and they kept feeding me things like The Hobbit and Robert A. Heinlein's young adult books and Ursula K. Le Guin's Earthsea trilogy and also P.G. Woodhouse's Jeeves stories. So that pretty much destroyed me for life, right?
All of them awesome books, by the way, yes.
But yeah, pretty much, I was doomed. It was either get into a career as a writer or have many, many years of very expensive therapy. So I went with the writer part. I always, many times people have asked me, when did you decide you wanted to become a writer? And it's like, it was always there. Right. I've always had the desire to create stories. It's just, I can't tell you where it came from because I can never remember a time when it was not the case. The first thing I wrote was when I was 6 years old. I did it on construction paper. It was called Reflections in My Mirror. It was terrible. I was 6. What do you want? But I still have it too. I keep it around to sort of keep me humble. But, and I kept writing all the time. In high school, I worked for the school newspaper. I wrote things for that, as well as what passed for a literary magazine at our high school. In college, I worked for the paper. That was what it was called. It was called The Paper at Fordham University. And I actually ran the art section for 3 years. And I wrote for a bunch of other things there too. I started writing for Library Journal magazine. And then eventually, after a few years writing book reviews and comics reviews and other kinds of reviews and doing the occasional news piece and interview here and there for a bunch of different magazines, eventually I started getting my own fiction published as well. That started in 1994 and with a Spider-Man short story. And then 1998 was when my first novels were published. And it just sort of snowballed from there.
That's awesome. Now, that sounds a lot like my own background. I was always a big reader as a child myself, and it got me into writing as well. And I've been writing literally ever since I can remember as well. So it seems to be that way with a lot of people that have, been introduced to books really early. They tend to love to write those books as well. It's just kind of the way that it always seems to work out. But that's really great that you've got this experience with it and that it's been a part of your life all along. I like that.
Yeah. And as you said, I've written a lot of fiction since then. I've done a lot of media tie-in work, which wasn't really what I intended. It's just sort of how things worked out.
Sort of fell in your lap.
I came into it as an editor. When I graduated college, I mentioned I'd worked on the paper in college, and that was when I discovered my love of editing, which was something I could actually get a job in right out of college, which I couldn't really do as a writer. So I worked for Library Journal magazine right out of college, and then later I went to work for Byron Price, who was a book packager. And while working as an editor for him, that's what gave me several of the opportunities. I've worked on a lot of tie-in properties. And licensed properties, and also got to work with writers who were also editors of other things. So the opportunity to pitch presented itself. And so that was how I sort of got into that end of the field. And for a long time, everything I'd done has been tie-in. I did Marvel Comics tie-ins, like I said, the Spider-Man novel I mentioned. I did a few movie novelizations here and there. I did Buffy the Vampire Slayer fiction, Star Trek fiction, Young Hercules. I did quite a bit of Star Trek, actually, between 1999 and 2014. I've written a ridiculous amount of Star Trek fiction.
You're the author of the Starfleet Corps of Engineers books, and I love those books. They're amazing.
I was the editor on those. That was my
gotcha.
project that I was in charge of. I also wrote for it quite a bit. But that was actually something I did as a freelance editor. I helped develop the series with John Rodover, who was one of the Trek editors at the time, and then the editing the monthly series fell to me after that. So I was the one who sort of guided that series over the seven or 8 years that we did it. And it was great. It was tremendous fun. I consider that one of my greatest accomplishments.
It's awesome.
In that series, we had so much fun with that.
As a Star Trek freak, I definitely approve. I love it. I'm a big freak about it, but yeah. For me, I would love to write media tie-in stuff. It's something that, I don't know, I've always been interested in. I think a lot of people get into doing fan fiction and think that it'll lead into like a media tie-in type of thing. Is that sort of how it works out with that kind of stuff, or is there more of a process to it?
The two aren't really related as such. I mean, they're two different things. They're related, obviously, but the one almost never leads to the other.
Right.
It does occasionally, but the requirements for writing tie-in fiction are very specific and will vary from license to license. As a general rule, people who edit tie-in fiction tend to go for people who are already established professionals, simply because there's already so many other things they have to deal with. They really don't want to have to nurse a newbie through the process.
Oh yeah.
Plus, there's a much more rigorous approvals process, because everything has to be approved by the owner of the IP. When you're writing fanfic, you don't have to get approval from anybody. Which does not make one better than the other. But it means, when you're writing fanfic, you can pick and choose the parts of the source material that you want to ignore if you don't want to. In order to facilitate your story. Tie-in writers don't have that luxury. We have to conform to what was established on screen or in the comic book or in the video game or whatever. And there are people, who will backstop us on that. Having said that, there are people who've edited tie-in fiction who have gone to fanfic writers to find people. It has been known to happen, but it's not a traditional entry point. Usually, like I said, they go with people who are already established, partly just because tie-in fiction is very deadline intensive, and because there's the extra layer of approvals, you need somebody who knows how to go through the process, who has a thick skin also, because you're going to get a lot of changes that have nothing to do with the quality of your work and have to do with, arcane aspects of the property that you may have missed or misunderstood.
Oh yeah.
Or just simply gotten wrong. So because of that, they would rather go with somebody who, like I said, has a certain amount of experience already.
Do they give you do they give you like Bibles, like the IP Bibles, for instance?
Everybody always asks that. No. Basically, you find out. You find out when you've done something wrong when you do it, and they tell you did that wrong. That's basically how this works. And usually if there is a Bible, when there's a Bible for a TV show, it's something that's meant as a guideline for the people writing for the show and it's early going.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of stuff that becomes out of date or useless as the show goes on. The best research material in terms of what you're going to do is the stuff itself. The only time I've gotten any kind of Bible-like material where it's been useful has been when I've done novels based on video games and role-playing games, because that's something where there isn't a single story as such, and it's not something that's all in one place. If you're writing a tie-in to a TV show, what you do is you sit and you watch the entire TV show.
Right. Yeah.
If you're doing a tie-in, to a comic book, then you become familiar with the comic book. If you're tying into a video game, there's lots of different backstory things that aren't necessarily available to the general public. There, yes, when I've done Command & Conquer and World of Warcraft and StarCraft and Dungeons & Dragons, then yes, there was Bible-like source material that I used. So, but for everything else, no. It's the actual stuff itself.
I understand completely. Yeah, I've always wondered about that. I know with some cases they have the source materials available for the writers or for editors and that kind of thing. But I didn't know if that was specific for just sort of the little side genres, or if it was kind of an overall the industry standard kind of thing.
And the answer to a lot of the questions you're probably going to ask me tonight are going to be, it depends, because there are so many different, every license is different from every other license.
Sure.
The needs are different. The requirements are different, and sometimes they change as you go along. In the earliest days, one perfect example, the Buffy the Vampire Slayer license, which I worked on both at its beginning and at its end. In the earliest days of the Buffy license, the tie-in fiction was very, very rigidly prescribed. They did not want to see anything in the books that couldn't be done on the show. They wanted, a Monster of the Week adventure in Sunnydale High School, just like what they did on the show. They didn't want you to go any farther afield than that. As the license went on, as the books became more popular, and particularly Buffy is a rare case where the books continued even after the show ended, then they were willing to go a little further afield. They were willing to leave Sunnydale occasionally. They were willing to do more out there stories. I actually wrote one called Blackout, which was the story of Nikki Wood, who was the New York-based vampire slayer from 1977 whom Spike killed on the subway. I got to do her story. Another author did a detailed look at Faith's life before she joined the cast of the show. So that they allowed that later. But so the what worked in the license changed as it went on, and that's not unusual for a license that lasts a particularly long time.
Gotcha. Yeah, I thought that Buffy was a little strange because they did a lot of work after the show ended. Do you think maybe that was because of Angel though too, or?
Not really. It was it was just a case of when you start out any tie-in line, you're going to start out conservatively because you don't know if it's going to be successful or not. And even if the show is successful, it doesn't mean tie-in fiction is going to be
right.
Successful.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you want to, when you're starting, you want to make sure that it's not something too off the beaten path because you want the people familiar with the show to like it. And so you want it to be as close as possible. And then once you're established, then you can get a little more risky and you can do a little more outre things and take more advantage of the format.
I can tell you one example that always comes to my mind of some really weird things that happen when it comes to media tie-in things was a Star Trek novel that was written a long time ago. I'm trying to remember the name of it, but I've read it a couple of times and really enjoyed it. It was a crossover between Star Trek The Next Generation and X-Men.
Yes.
Do you know the one I'm talking about?
I actually was a consulting editor on that book.
Were you? Okay, it's a great book, yeah. But it's weird, it's like one of those weird things how did this even happen,
Well, that was due to an arrangement that at that point Marvel and Paramount had entered into a partnership to do Star Trek comic books. And they had done a Star Trek X-Men comic book, and so the novel was done to tie into that.
I
that was
see.
All happening at the same time. So.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. I always wondered how that came about. It was just one of those weird things. But it's a good book. I would definitely recommend it out there.
Oh yeah, I had fun with it.
We did have a question that came in, and this is more specific towards writers, and I wanted to make sure to get this here. I've got some ideas of my own as far as this goes, but they're wondering, since you're such a prolific writer, how do you end writer's block? What are some ways that you have with it? I
can't. I don't have time for writer's block. I just my solution is to just power through it. The trick is, and this is something that I try always to tell aspiring writers and up and coming writers, is the first draft is allowed to suck. So even if you're struggling with writing, just put one word in front of the other. You can always go back and fix it later. But the first thing you put down is not likely to be how it's going to be in the end anyway. And it is much better to power through to the end. It is easier to fix a finished story than it is an incomplete story.
Absolutely, yeah.
So if I'm having writer's block of some sort, I ignore it and I keep writing anyway. I just keep throwing some words down, even if I know they're bad. And, a lot of the words that I write are going to be the and anyway. So just plow on through and go back and fix it later. It's much better to have actually written something than not.
I agree with that.
If it's not your best works, so what? You'll make it that way.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it changes in the edit process in a big way. Yeah. Mm-hmm. For me, it's always a thing of, number one, habit. If you get into the habit of you write at certain times, or you have a certain place that you're always sitting when you write, when you sit down in that spot, your brain is programmed already to, well, I'm going to be in writer mode when I'm sitting in this place, or when I've got this thing around me, or whatever the case may be, the rituals that us writers always do. Right. So,
and what you've got to do is find the mode of writing that you are most comfortable in. Right. And it's different for everyone.
Right.
For some people it's the local Starbucks. For some people it's one room in their house. For some people it's, out in the park on their laptop. For some, it's hiking in the woods and dictating into Dragon Dictate software and then dumping it into the computer later. Everybody's got their own thing, and you have to find that, sweet spot that allows you to do your best work. And for some people, it's finding the right music to listen to. There's all sorts of things.
I love epic score music. That stuff will get me in writing mode in a heartbeat. Love it. Yeah. So, another thing that I always do too is I ask the sideline question, what if? That what if question, if you have two characters that are there in a scene or something like that, well, what if I do this, or what if I tweak this? And it might spark a few different ideas to run with and get those words going on the page. You never know what'll cue your subconscious to bring something up. It's always thinking in weird, bizarre ways anyway. So why not, right?
Yeah.
That's the way I look at it anyways. So I guess that would be a question then I would ask for you is do you have any rituals that you like to do when you sit down to write, or do you just sit and you write and that's it and you just go? You don't have to have a specific place or anything like that,
What I like is not having a set ritual, actually. It's one of the things. I've been freelance now for almost 20 years, and what I like about it is I can set my own schedule, and it will vary depending on the needs of a particular day. But mostly it's a case of I can write pretty much anywhere. The best thing for me is the right music. I have a writing playlist that is a particular type of music that I write well to, which is, a couple bands that I like. And I've discovered a long time ago that this particular music gets me in the right mode for writing, so I stick with it, and it still works. So, and I found if I vary from it, it actually ends badly. So I go back to it. Beyond that, I'm generally pretty comfortable writing anywhere. My wife and I recently moved to another place. I've been in the same place for 15 years. And we recently moved in, and the new place is actually the office that we've set up is really a good working space for me, so that helps. But that's pretty much it. I mean, there was one novel I wrote, a StarCraft novel that came out in 2006. I wrote that book in the following places. I wrote it in my apartment, in the Starbucks up the street, in a hotel room in Glasgow, Scotland, in a pub in Dublin. Actually, more of the book was written in that pub in Dublin than anywhere else, and I actually dedicated the book to that pub in Dublin. In a small house owned by a friend in County Wicklow, Ireland, in a hotel room in Atlanta, and on various planes and trains that took me back and forth among all those places. So, yeah. That and I'm quite proud of that book. So it worked out okay. Like I said, a big chunk of it was written in that pub because that was we were in Dublin for about a week and a half, and every afternoon I would spend some time in that pub working on the book, and that's where I got a big chunk of it done. I'd order a Smithwick's and some kind of meat sandwich or other and plow away at it. So
if you had habituated yourself to writing in a certain spot or a certain, factor involved with it, you probably wouldn't have been able to write that as well.
Yeah, well, and that's just it. There's so many, there's so many different, and I travel a lot. I do a lot of conventions, and it's easier to be able to do that, to be able to, sit and write anywhere.
I definitely agree with you there. That's kind of how I am too. I do have a couple of little habits that I do, but for the most part, it's just the equipment that I use. Helps me facilitate a little bit because of the visual issues that I have. I have to have things in a little bit of a certain way just so that I can see what I'm doing. I've tried to do like the Dragon software, the dictation and that kind of thing. My problem with that kind of stuff is I'm not as flowery when I talk as I am when I write. So it never seems to come out correctly for me. It drives me crazy. So, okay, well, one other question that I would have then regarding those kind of things is, Do you have like a certain amount of words per day that you like to set for yourself as a goal, or do you just kind of lay down and write whatever comes out?
I just lay down and write. There are times I used to do this more often. I haven't been doing it as much lately. I'm not really sure why I stopped, but I used to do a thing where I knew I had X number of days to write a book. So I would set a daily word count goal for myself simply in order to hit that deadline. I stopped doing that for some reason. I'm not really sure why, but
So things like NaNoWriMo, for instance, the National Novel Writing Month. Do you like doing that kind of thing? Have you ever done that kind of thing yourself? Or
I actually wound up doing it once, not because I wanted to, but because I happened to have a November 1st deadline. So I figured, hey, I'll do a December 1st deadline, and I said, oh, what the hell? I love NaNoWriMo. I think it's a great idea. And I think it's a very valuable thing, especially for upcoming writers to do, not because it helps them with their craft, but because it helps them with their professionalism. The point of NaNoWriMo is not to make you a better writer, it's to make you a better professional writer. It will make you more conscious of deadlines, and the idea of trying to hit a particular writing goal will help with your self-discipline also. Self-discipline is incredibly important if you want to be a professional writer, because you have to hit deadlines, and you have to, and nobody's going to force you to do it. If you're working in an office environment, you have a boss who will sit on you and basically tell you must get this done by this time. And if you keep missing those deadlines, eventually you will get fired. If you're self-employed or if you're freelance, you yourself have to be the one to force yourself to do the work, because there's no outside force that's going to do it. So something like NaNoWriMo and things like that force you to hit a certain word count by a certain date is fantastic, because it makes you aware of those deadlines. It makes you aware of the time constraints. And it also forces you out of your comfort zone and forces you to, avoid the excuses. Oh, I don't feel like writing today. I'll do it tomorrow.
I'll do 3,000 tomorrow.
Got a month. So, and that's sort of, it helps you put off the procrastination monster, which can be brutal. And that's like I said, I love it. It didn't exist when I first came up as a writer, although I would have loved it. And like I said, I did wind up doing it once when I had a book I had to write in a month's time that was due December 1st. So, hey! So
go with the timing. You may as well, right? Yeah, I like the possibilities of what comes out of NaNoWriMo. I know a lot of people have really gotten into doing it. I've got a couple of family members that have done it quite a bit, and they love doing it. And I really do like to encourage them to do it, because, I know for me, writing is very cathartic. There's a lot of things that I've been through in my life, and I like to twist some of those things into the writings that I do, just because, well, it helps me, as a therapy thing. You said you had a choice between either, being in therapy or being a writer. And for me, sometimes writing is therapy, right? I mean, what do you think about that?
It can be. I think it's better to say that it can be therapeutic. I've found that when people use writing as therapy, it becomes really bad writing. But, having said that, it can be very, it's one way to get the voices in your head to shut the hell up.
Right.
So.
Right. Definitely. Okay. So we had a couple other questions that came in from the chat here, and I'll go ahead and hit them here before we hit our first break. They were kind of wondering, as far as your writing style is concerned, or the way that you do things, how do you do things? Do you come up with characters first and then plot later, or do you have a plot and kind of surround it with the characters? Now, I know in your case with the media tie-in stuff, you do, pretty much very subjective to what they want, and the characters are already established and stuff. But I know that you do a lot of things that are outside of the other people's intellectual properties too. I've
got plenty of my own original stuff. The thing is, there is no one answer to that question, because each one is different. I mean, to looking at each of the original universes that I work in, I've got a series, the Dragon Precinct series, which are high fantasy police procedurals, kind of Law and Order meets Lord of the Rings. It's it takes place in a traditional high fantasy setting with humans and elves and dwarves and wizards and magic and stuff. But the main characters are detectives who solve crimes. That was a case where the characters actually came first. the two main characters in the Dragon Precinct stories are characters who I originally actually played as D&D characters when I was in college, and I liked them so much I wanted to do something with them, and eventually I hit upon the idea of them being detectives. So that was a case where the characters came first, and then the idea of the plot came later. There's another series I've done called Super City Cops, which is also a fantastical police procedural, but in this case it's cops in a modern city that is filled with superheroes. So it's the equivalent of like the Metropolis Police Department or the Gotham City Police Department, that sort of thing.
That would be a heck of a job, wouldn't it?
Yeah, oh yeah. I've done one novel, 2 short stories, and 3 novellas in that setting. The 3 novellas were recently released as ebooks, and you can find them online under Super City Cops. And that was a case where the concept came first. That was not so much the plot as such, but the setting was what I originally came up with. There's a series of urban fantasy stories I've done in Key West, Florida, that were entirely inspired by also by the setting more than the plot. That was a case of visiting Key West and deciding, hey, I could write really cool urban fantasy stories here, and building the stories around that. Another set of stories I've done 2 of so far, with more to come, is a modern day Sherlock Holmes pastiche with a young woman named Shirley Holmes and a guy named Jack Watson in modern day New York. And that strictly completely came first from the characters. So there's no one answer to that. You know, everything comes from a different places, inspired by different things. You know, I've had Star Trek novels that I've written where, you know, my 2 best Star Trek novels, in my opinion, are, one is a novel where somebody else came to me with the basic concept of, hey, let's do a Star Trek version of The West Wing. And that resulted in a novel called Articles of the Federation, which was a year in the life of the Federation president. That came out of the concept. There was another one called The Art of the Impossible, which grew out of a 30-second conversation between Dr. Bashir and Garak in a Deep Space Nine episode, where there's a throwaway reference to the Batrika Nebula incident. We learned just enough about it to be intriguing, and nothing beyond that, so I built an entire novel around it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, the another current thing I'm working on, I'm in the middle right now of an urban fantasy novel that'll be out from Wordfire Press once I get it finished, called A Furnace Sealed, which is an urban fantasy taking place in New York City, specifically in the Bronx, which is where I'm from. And that grew out of working for the U.S. Census Bureau in 2009 and 2010 in the Bronx, and just seeing how much diversity and history and stuff is in my home borough, you know, where I've lived most of my life, and thinking, you know, there's a lot of fodder for fiction here. And so, you know, the inspiration comes from everywhere and anywhere.
Do you, weird question. And by the way, I'm looking really forward to that Furnace Sealed book. I saw a couple of excerpts that you have on your website about that, and oh boy, it looks really good. I'm definitely intrigued by it and want to read it myself. Oh,
good.
So you got at least one. The question I would ask then in relation to this stuff is, have you ever written a story, like whether a short story or even a novel or something along those lines, where you had like one piece of dialogue that was in your head that just kept kind of rolling around or echoing around, and you just wrote a story surrounding that piece of dialogue? Actually, yes. It was a story I was already assigned to do, but I didn't really have much of a story initially. It was for a Zorro anthology that Moonstone Books published in 2011, and I wanted to do a story that focused on Zorro's principal bad guy in the Zorro stories, which is Captain Monasterio, who's a military captain for the Spanish Army stationed in Alta California, where Zorro operates, and his task is to stop Zorro. And I generally wanted to, think about, all right, this is a guy, yes, he's a jerk, but he's also a military captain who's following orders. He's going after Zorro because his superior told him to. And, from his point of view, Zorro's the bad guy. He's the one who's, he's an outlaw. He's causing these problems. He's in the military. And I didn't have a specific plot in mind. I just vaguely wanted to
try to look at things from his perspective and how he would view the world. And then this one line of dialogue dropped into my head. And that line was Montessori saying to Zorro, "You see, Zorro, while your mask frees you, my rank shackles me."
That's a good
And the whole
dialogue.
story, thank you. The whole story just completely blossomed outward from there, from that one line. So yeah, that was one case.
That's a really good one too. That's awesome. I've had a couple that I've written specifically because of a piece of dialogue decided to kick itself around in my head for whatever reason. I actually wrote one full book that was like that too. So just it's interesting what ends up like coming into our heads sometimes and what we end up doing with it.
There was another story that was prompted by a specific image, and then that image wound up not being in the story.
Go figure, right?
And I am perfectly fine with it not being in the story because it wound up not being a good fit anymore once the story was written, even though that was what got me started on the damn thing in the first place. But
well, let's go ahead and hit a break here real quick, Keith. And before we do, why don't you go ahead and give your website info, where people can find your books. That way they can go take a look while we're on the break.
If you go to DeCandido.net, that's my last name, DeCandido.net. Right now, it's just a link dump. It's eventually I'm going to be redesigning the site. I'm talking with somebody about it, but at the moment, if you go to DeCandido.net, that will link you to my books on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, IndieBound, and Kobo. You can find them there or on iTunes or any of the other usual places you can find books. Any of the usual online dealers. The DeCandido.net also has links to my blog, my Facebook page, my podcast, my Twitter feed, to my articles at Tor.com, where I've been doing a lot of pop culture writing over the last 6 years, and a bunch of other things. So that's sort of the core spot where you can find my online footprint. So you can head there, DeCandido.net.
I think pretty much if they just typed in Keith DeCandido, they'd bring up I found all kinds of great stuff. With that, you, so. Yeah. You're very prolific, that's for sure. Well, let's go ahead and hit a break, and when we come back, we'll go ahead and take calls if anybody wants to call in. The call-in number tonight is 260-494-3937. Our Skype line is JDA Film, and as always, you can reach us over in the chat room at LNM Radio Network. Don't forget, we're also live streaming onto YouTube as well. That's youtube.com/C/Open Eyes Network. Make sure you guys stick around. If you have any questions, go ahead and pop them into the chat room or call in. We'll be back in just a few minutes, folks.
There are days that the red pill is bitter in my stomach, but I can't get it back out. I think because I have to. I speak because I have no choice. I walk through this dark age we're in with open eyes. Listen to Open Eyes on LateNightInTheMidlands.com. And together, maybe we won't stumble and fall.
The LNM Radio Network offers a chat room for you, the listener, to connect with others whom are interested in the topics and guests that the LNM Radio Network brings to you. During the live shows, the hosts will even visit the chat room and chat with you, the listener. Click on the big red Chat and Listen button at the top of the website and join us. No subscription is needed at either lnmradionetwork.com or latenightinthemidlands.com.
Why subscribe to Late Night in the Midlands, you ask? Well, I'll tell you why. Late Night in the Midlands covers everything, and through the thousands of expert guests who have joined Michael Vera on his show, come pieces of the big puzzle, which started many years ago. Michael and his guests reveal information dating back to the beginning of time. To this very moment, Michael Vera not only brings you the best guests with the best information, but Michael is not afraid to call out those who are less than honest. You see, in this day and age, We need a radio show we can count on and a radio host we can trust to expose the truth one show at a time. So become a late nighter and subscribe now. Talk radio like no other. Late Night in the Midlands, bringing the truth back to talk radio.
Do you need toner for your Epson, Hewlett-Packard, Canon, Brother, Apple, or Sharp printers? Look no further than Laser Technologies. In business for over 20 years, they offer the lowest prices on toner on the web. They can also repair your laser printers and toners fast and easy. Call their expert staff today at 561-792-9600 or email us at service@laser-technologies.com for all your toner needs. All toner is shipped nationwide. Why wait? Get the lowest prices on toner. Call or email us today.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Open Eyes. My name is Ira Robinson, and we'll be taking your calls here whenever you want to join in with us. 260-494-3937. That's 260-494-EYES, and you can join in and talk to Keith if you wish to. Ask him anything. I'm sure he'll answer. And it'll probably be depends, right there.
I'll make something up that sounds really convincing.
Exactly. So, Keith, before we hit the break there, we were having some really interesting talks about the industry and how we work as authors and that kind of thing. Now, a question that I have for you is, to you, what do you think is the most important part to a story? Do you think it's the characters, the plot? I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
Oh God. Depending on the story. I mean, every story has different needs, and I think that's trying to find some, single magic bullet just doesn't. I mean, writing's more complicated than that. Each story has its own needs and desires and important parts, and also each writer has things that they do better than others. I mean, like for me, the characters have to be interesting, or I'm not gonna, really be able to do much with it. The characters have to be. I have to find something about the characters that is compelling to me, so I'm willing to follow them around to whatever it is they're doing. To me, in particular, also dialogue is important. Conversations between people are important. That's the life's blood of the stories that I do. There are other writers who don't focus on that as much, simply because that's not what they're interested in writing. But I don't think you can be that specific with it, because it, like I keep saying, it depends.
Right. Yeah. I tend to be really emotive in my stories, but there are other stories where that emotive kind of thing isn't the appropriate thing for the story. So, it might have more action kind of oriented things with it, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. I mean, and like I said, each writer has different things they like to focus on, and if assuming they do it well, then that's fine. I mean, and that's good. That means that people are going to get something different out of a book by one writer than they are from another, right. Which is as it should be.
Right, exactly. We're all unique, and we all have our own unique voices there, right?
Yes.
Now, kind of a side question to that, or a side statement, I guess, is the reason why I asked that question is because I keep seeing people that are like writing advisors. There's the people that are out there that try to give advice as far as, how to write or things along those lines. And they always say, well, this one thing is the most important thing and it's what you should concentrate on. Others might say, that first sentence is the most important thing and you need to really make sure that thing is the best it's ever going to be or nobody's ever going to read it and that kind of thing. To me, I look at all of that and think, okay, yeah, those things might be important things to these little bowls of brain soup that we make, but at the same time, each reader is an individual kind of thing as well. They have their own taste. They might not be interested in the first line, but maybe the first whole chapter they'll give a chance to and say, okay, well, now I'm not interested or something like that, right?
Yeah, but I mean, it is true that the opening is important simply because the job of the first line is to make you want to read the second line. The job of the first chapter is to make you want to read the second chapter.
Sure, yeah.
You don't want to. You need to give your readers a reason to keep going. Once you get farther into the book, then they're invested. But in that first page, in that first chapter, you have to provide them with something that actually makes them interested in the story you're telling.
Right,
and that is important. How you do that, there are tons of different ways you can do that. And some writers are better at it than others, and some novels are better. I mean, I've written some great openings, and I've written some terrible openings. It's difficult, and some writers can get sometimes you get so caught up in it that you don't actually move forward, which is bad. Although, having said that, the most common piece of advice that I, as an editor, have given to upcoming writers and new writers is cut the first chapter or cut the first few pages. So often, people, especially less experienced writers, have a tendency to not actually start the story where the story starts, but to do all sorts of setup or all sorts of gloss or all sorts of flash or something that has nothing to do with the actual story, because they're micromanaging that opening so much that they've lost sight of actually telling the story. It's hard. I mean, if it was easy, everybody would do it.
This is true.
But yes, but having said that, yes, the opening is in fact very important, because if you pick up a book in a bookstore or you look at the excerpt online or whatever, if they're not interested in the first thing you've written, they're not going to bother, because there's 800 other books sitting on the shelf that might be more interesting.
Right, exactly. So. Exactly. Well, then a side question to that, and we have a call that's coming in. We'll go ahead and bring them in after this question.
Okay.
I know with you, it's probably going to be a little bit different because you come from also the editing type of background. But okay, if somebody tells you need to change this part of the story, or you need to change that part of the story, or this character is not working, cut them entirely, or whatever the case may be, do you end up feeling like really offended by that kind of thing? Because I know a lot of authors out there do, like they take it, these are my brain children, right?
Then if you're going to take that stuff personally, write fanfic or self-publish or whatever, because you don't have the temperament to do this professionally.
Right.
Yes, you're going to get edited. Everybody needs editing. Nobody's work is perfect, and the worst judge of your own writing is you yourself.
Right.
Because not so much, because I've looked at some stuff I've written and known it was crap, but the hardest thing, and the reason why you need somebody else to look at your fiction, is that when you're reading your own work, you have access to your innermost thoughts, so you know what you meant when you wrote that. Not everybody is going to, though. You have to make sure that you actually conveyed this to people without access to your brain. And so you need other people to keep you honest and to make sure that, make it clear that you actually conveyed what you meant to convey.
Right.
And everything has room for improvement, and that's what editors are there for. And I have gotten into fights with editors, pleasant fights, civil fights, over things where I thought something was important to keep in or to keep as it was, and that they wanted to change. And sometimes I've won those fights, and sometimes I've lost those fights. You have to pick your battles. There are some things where they've suggested the change, and it's like, okay, I don't care either way, so go ahead and change it if you think it'll be better that way. But the editing is a very important part of the process. It's what keeps the writer honest. It's what keeps And the editor isn't there to insult you and isn't there to make you feel bad. The editor is there to make the work better. That's what they're going for. They're trying to make the book the best it possibly can be. So to react badly to that is just counterproductive for everyone.
Sure, and I mean it's to their benefit as well because their own work is reflected in what comes out in the book. So it reflects on them.
Yeah, no editor, and it's true. Some editors may not get your work, and that does happen. But no editor is in this specifically to sabotage you or to make you look bad. They're in it to make your book better. That's what they're there for.
Right, right. Gotcha. And that's a really reasonable answer. I like it. You know, like I said, a lot of authors, they feel that offended kind of thing when they see an edit. The only time I've ever had an issue with an editor myself was when I had a specific type of dialogue that I was trying to convey with one of my characters. They spoke sort of in a certain type of dialecting kind of thing. And they were trying to say, well, this needs to be in plain English. And I'm like, no, this is part of their whole story. I mean, it's part of their character, right?
Yeah.
So, and they kind of didn't understand that and didn't want to deal with that, but you know, it is what it is. And that's when you maybe find a different editor that would be more, you know, open to that kind of thing too. So,
yeah.
So let's go ahead and bring the caller in. I do believe this is Katie calling in. Katie, are you there with us?
Hi.
Hi, Katie. What's on your mind tonight?
Hi, Keith. I actually really like your work. You probably would have spoken to my husband, Daryl, on Facebook.
Okay. Probably, yeah.
Yeah, that's actually my husband. We're also Ira's publisher. But what I wanted to know, I've got a couple of questions for you. How did you get into writing supernatural books? I'm actually a huge fan of the seasons, the TV series anyway. And recently we just finished off a marathon. We're sitting there going, oh, when the season's finishing. But can I ask you, are you bringing out another supernatural books? And how did you get into writing supernatural?
I don't have another supernatural novel planned at the moment. I did contribute to, there's a thing that Inside Editions is putting out, which is a facsimile of John Winchester's journal, which is a notebook that also has some bits from John's journal in it, and I wrote the text for that. But I don't currently have any more supernatural novels planned. I am talking about a supernatural project with somebody that hasn't been settled yet. I can't really say what it is, but I'm not entirely done with the Winchester Boys just yet. I actually got into writing the book simply because the editor who was in charge of the supernatural novels when they first got the license was somebody who knew me from. He was somebody with whom I'd worked when we were both editors on Marvel Comics novels. He was the editor at the publishing partner that we worked with on those, and so he was familiar with my work already. And we'd never actually worked together as writer and editor. He knew I was a fan of the show, and when he was given charge of the license, I was one of the people he got in touch with to possibly pitch something. And I actually pitched two things. They went for one of them, and then when they put out two novels initially, mine and also Witch's Canyon by Jeff Maria. And my first book, Nevermore, did so well that they actually went ahead and commissioned a third book, and they said, hey, you want to do the other one you sent us? So, so I got to write Bone Key as well. And then later I also pitched Heart of the Dragon, and I haven't done any since. It just hasn't worked out that way. But I'm hoping to do more supernatural stuff in the future. We'll see how things go.
I would love you to do more supernatural stuff. I really do like your books too.
Thank you.
Just an off question. If you were a superhero, what powers would you have? What would you name yourself, and what costume would you actually wear?
Oh God, my answer to the question about
saying it from a standpoint, because I mean, obviously you do comics, so it would it'd be interesting to put yourself into a comic.
The superpower I have always wanted is flight, because it would be cool. I remember one time I went parasailing, and it was the most wonderful experience, and that's probably not as close as you can get to unaided flight in real life. It was amazing, and I'd love to be able to just fly like that. I mean, that's not a particularly useful superpower in terms of fighting crime or anything. Having said that, if I did have the power of flight, the costume I would pick would be one that would keep me warm and cut down on wind resistance, because, man, it gets cold up there and windy. So, yeah. And what I call myself, I don't know. I'd probably just call myself Keith. I think the whole idea of code names is kind of silly.
I would have to wear a suit if I was flying. I'd have to wear a suit that didn't want to pull down in the wind. I wouldn't want to try to land. Yeah. Try to land with things fairly, showing. Tight fitting and insulated and and something definitely that would cover my hair. Because I'd be brushing the crap out of that afterwards. Yeah, definitely.
Now, I hear people keep saying about the publishing industry is actually dying. I personally think it's evolving, but there's so many options.
I have been in the publishing business since 1990. And in the entire 27 years I have been in this business, people have been saying that publishing is dying, publishing is going to be dead in 5 years. They were wrong in 1990, and they're wrong now. The publishing industry is not going anywhere. You are correct. It is, in fact, evolving. And it's been fascinating to watch how it's adjusted.
I say that because I'm a publisher myself, so I've been a publisher since 2014. So I kind of find it unconvincing that people keep saying that it's dying. I do, however, think that in terms of paperback and hardback books and ebooks, that paperback is now on the rise, and not so many ebooks are out there that are quite selling as well as they should be.
Oh, it was always bound to level off at some point. I mean, it's been now 10 years since the Kindle became a thing and pretty much turned ebooks into something that was read by more than, a few people who wanted to read it on their computer. Once you got good handheld e-readers that were good for mass consumption, there was going to be a spike, but eventually that was bound to level off. And, it's not going to go anywhere because, entertainment media don't disappear. Theater did not, movies did not destroy theater. Radio did not destroy theater or movies. Television didn't destroy movies or theater or radio. It just changed them. It's, the only time a medium disappears is when something supplants it that equals what it did, which is why you don't see VHS tapes anymore. But the format isn't likely to go anywhere as long as we still consume things on cell phones and tablets and computers, simply because that's where we do most of our reading anyway, whether it's books or not.
I know a lot of people, though, still crave that very visceral feeling of holding a book in their hand, sitting in a nice room and that kind of thing, and reading with it. And
I just moved recently, and I got to tell you, it was a lot easier to move my ebooks than it was to move my print books.
Yes.
And also I edited a line of ebooks from 2000 to 2007, the Starfleet Corps of Engineers books that we were talking about before. Those were released initially as ebooks, and it was before the Kindle, unfortunately. So I was constantly saying to people, I would miss the smell of books, to which my response is, I didn't realize you read with your nose. Yes, the tactile thing is not unimportant,
right.
But to my mind, as a writer, I could give a damn how they read it as long as they're reading it. I don't care if they're reading it in hardcover, paperback, ebook, or stone tablets. As long as people are reading in a format that they're comfortable with, and again, everybody's comfortable with something different. Some people prefer hardcovers, some people prefer paperbacks, some people prefer ebooks. There's lots of people who are reading because books are available to read on their phones who wouldn't be reading otherwise, because they're carrying the phone with them anyway.
Right, exactly. I like the fact that it is as, widespread as it is now, that there are a lot of these different choices that are there, because everybody's different. Again, every reader is different, just like every writer is different, and there's going to be a niche for everybody, Yeah.
And that's also how publishing is, as Katie said, evolving. It's changing to fit people's needs. And it's been fascinating to watch, simply because, like I said, I've been in publishing for almost 30 years now, and there are few industries in this world slower to change than publishing, and they're being forced to change quickly, and they really don't like it. When I started in the 90s, a lot of publishers were still not entirely convinced that this whole computer thing was just a passing fad. It was one of the last industries to embrace computers that really could use it. And it could be very frustrating at times. But now everything's changing so quickly that they're being forced to adapt, and it's been very difficult. But it's been fascinating to watch and to live through. And people have made mistakes and things have gone wrong. I can think of one particular decision that I made in 2011 that I deeply regret, because I actually bought into a certain amount of hype that was unfounded. And I think my career would be much different now if I hadn't made that decision. But, crap happens. So.
Well, I have a related question then. You do a lot of comic book work and a lot of...
not a lot. I wrote the Farscape comic for 3 years.
Okay.
That's the most extensive comics work I've done. Beyond that, I've done, a Star Trek comic here, a StarCraft comic there, a Cars comic here.
Okay.
And that's about it. I haven't... And there's also a new one called Icarus, which is an adaptation of a graphic novel, which I wrote the script for. But I haven't done a ton of comics work. I think I've honestly done more prose adaptations of comics comedies than I have actual comic books.
Okay. Well, that might answer the question.
Having said that, yes, I have worked in the industry, so yeah.
That might actually answer the question that I had of which do you kind of prefer? Which do you like to do more, the comic work?
I like them both. I mean, I'm more comfortable in prose just because that's what I've done more of.
Okay.
And that's been my primary mode of creative writing for pretty much my entire life. Having said that, I love doing comics. I particularly loved, once, especially with the Farscape comic, I got to do that for 3 years, so I got into a really good rhythm with it, and I really enjoyed it. It's a fun medium to work in, especially if you've got a good artist to work with. Will Sliney, who was the artist I worked with on for most of the Farscape comics, was great to work with. He and I really, and especially once we'd gotten into a rhythm, we were really good at playing to each other's strengths and working with each other. Also, Caleb Cleveland, who I worked with on the two of the Dargo miniseries, was really good to work with. He and I were completely on the same wavelength on everything we did. And I did 2 Star Trek comics with J.K. Woodward, where I would work with J.K. again in a heartbeat. If I was given, told, you can write this comic book and you can pick your own artist, J.K. would be my first, second, third, and 10th choice. He was just phenomenal to work with. We did a Star Trek comic together, one of IDW's Alien Spotlight comics, one that focuses on the Klingons. And the way I set it up was, it was Kang, Michael Ansara's character, who appeared on both the original series and on DS9 and Voyager. Kang, at 3 different points in his life, telling a story about something either from Klingon history or from his own history. And in each case, for lack of a better word, moral of the story was 4,000 throats may be cut in a single night by a running man, which is a line that was spoken on the first episode he appeared in Day of the Dove on the original series. And J.K. took it one step further. He did each of those 3 stories Kang told in a different art style.
Really?
Yeah. And that made, and then the framing sequence was in a 4th separate art style, which was, just his basic line drawing style. But it was great. It was really wonderful, and it just made the book it made my story better. It made the comic look better. It conveyed the different, modes of the story was in better. It was amazing. And I didn't come up with that. I didn't even expect him to do that. I just figured he'd just draw the story. And he decided to take it one step further. And it's a wonderful example of how the collaborative nature of comics work. When the writer and artist are working together to develop the story, it's that much better.
Yeah, I've definitely heard some horror stories from that industry over the years, as far as that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, it can go the other way too. There was especially if there's no communication.
Right.
There was only one artist when I worked on Farscape that I didn't have direct communication with, and he's a good artist. I have no complaints about I doubt anybody who read the book noticed anything wrong, but it didn't quite convey what I wanted it to, because I wasn't in touch with him and we didn't have the chance to really collaborate the way I would have liked to. It was just him drawing my words without any contact, and the story was weaker. The comic was weaker for that. So what are you gonna do? it does happen sometimes, unfortunately. But
yeah, exactly. Well, then another question that I would have that's regarding collaborations. Have you done any collaborations with people as far as novelizations are concerned, or writing fiction where you're working with another writer together? Or if you haven't...
Yeah, I haven't done it recently, but, well, I sort of have. Early in my career, I did... my first novel, actually, and my first short story were both collaborations with two different writers, and I've collaborated with a couple of one short story and two of the Corps of Engineers novellas were collaborations with Dave Mack, and I co-wrote a short story with my then wife Marina France, which was in one of the Chicks and Chainmail anthologies. Like I said, my first story was a collaboration with John Betancourt on a Spider-Man story, and Jose Nieto co-wrote my first Spider-Man novel with me. So I've done it before, and for that matter, there've been a bunch of projects, mostly in the Star Trek domain, where it was a direct collaboration, but I was very closely in touch with other authors and coordinating what we did with each other. So that happened a lot. I've collaborated on a number of occasions, and each collaboration is different from every other one, and how it works is different, but it's always been fun. And I'd do it again if the right opportunity presented itself.
Gotcha. Okay, so that answers another question that I had. I was going to ask you if you prefer to work on your own.
It hasn't come up. There are circumstances where I would do it again.
I've done it a couple of times. But
having said that, I just realized I just did do it again. But the project hasn't been sold yet, so it's not really something I can talk about in depth.
Gotcha.
But it's another project where basically it was me taking a movie treatment and writing a novel based on it, but it wasn't just me taking the movie treatment and running with it. I've been in constant contact with the person who wrote the movie treatment. So we're working very closely on that. So that is definitely a direct collaboration as well.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's been fine,
I've done it a couple of times. I didn't really care for it too much, but I suppose I could do it depending on the person that I do it with. The ones that I did it with, I didn't get along with that great, and it just didn't. We both had kind of like different writing styles, I guess. So to me, when I would read it and I'd see the overarching picture, I could tell really big time when it was me and when it was him, And for me, I think with collaborations, if you can get, maybe that would be solved with editing too, but if the reader is really aware that they're two different writers that are writing it, I think that's where some difficulties come in. At least to me, I don't know. But anyways, Katie, did you have any other questions?
I did. I was going to go back to what I was asking about, talking about the publishing industry, actually.
I'm sorry. I totally digressed on you.
That's okay. That's absolutely fine. I was just saying, this is targeted for new aspiring writers that are out there, and just getting your advice for it. You and I both know as publishers, there's many different options and things like that for like small presses that accept unaged submissions, big publishing houses, self-publishing, and so on and so forth. What's your best advice? Where should they start?
They should start with actually finishing their story, which sounds facile, but you'd be amazed how many people don't. Get the story, the novel, the whatever, finished first. The ratio of stories that have been started to stories that have been finished is about 80 billion to 0.5. It's really easy to start a story. It is incredibly difficult to finish it, there's nothing you can do with it until it's done. So that's my big piece of advice, is to actually finish it first, and then after that, do your research. It is ridiculously easy to get your hands on publishing guidelines for different publishers or submissions guidelines for different agents, and follow them. Submissions guidelines are very much like a job interview. If you do it wrong, they're not going to bother taking you. So I think that's those are the two main pieces of advice. Finish what you start, because if you don't finish it, then you haven't actually written anything yet. And follow whatever the submissions guidelines are, because if you don't follow, the submission guidelines are there to show the editor that you can follow simple instructions. And if you can't even do that, they're not going to want to work with you. So
that's definitely good advice. Yeah. So you don't recommend, like, I've run across people that recommend like trying to pitch agents with an idea that you have before you even finish writing it. And I've always thought, that doesn't seem too legitimate to me. But
yeah, but then they're not going to want to take you on if you don't have something that they can immediately turn around.
Something tangible, right? Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. You know,
you'll find a lot of agents out there too that'll give guarantees to the story, even if whether you've written it or not.
Yeah, it can happen, but it's always better. It's always better to have something this way. If you pitch them the idea and they say, "Wow, that's great! I'd love to see that," you can send it to them without having to wait 9, 10, 11 months when they've already forgotten what your pitch was. It's kind of hard to strike while the iron's hot when you haven't even heated up the iron yet.
Exactly. Sort of like that whole elevator speech. You want to have it prepped and ready to go, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything else, Katie?
My next question is, are you going to be at Comic-Con in Baltimore in 2017 or in a guest lineup at all?
Wasn't planning to. I've only been to Baltimore Comic-Con once. I enjoyed it, but that was back when I was doing the Farscape comic. I'm not even sure when it is, but I don't know if I'm going or not, honestly. But probably not. I'm doing a lot of conventions this year as it is. I will be at New York Comic-Con, and I will be in Baltimore over Memorial Day weekend for BaltCon. But and I'll also be at the Short Lead Convention in north of Baltimore in July.
So do you like doing cons? Do you like doing the cons?
Oh, I love doing cons. Yeah, God, I usually do at least 15 a year, sometimes more. Hell, just this year in March and April, I did like almost a convention every weekend. Not quite every weekend, but pretty close. It was like 6 conventions in 8 weeks.
And
one of the weekends when I didn't go to a convention, I got married. So it's been a very busy spring.
I saw that. Congratulations, by the way. That was just recent. So.
Yes, April 22nd. My fiance, she's been my fiance for 4 years. We've been dating for 8 years, and we finally, got married. So if nothing else, it's easier for me to call her my wife than my fiance because life only has one syllable, and I'm incredibly lazy.
So, would you say you're an introvert or an extrovert? He seemed like an extrovert, considering you do these cons and stuff like that. But I know a lot of writers are introverts. So,
no, I'm very much an extrovert. To a sometimes appalling degree, actually. No, I love people. I love interacting with people. I also, in addition to doing conventions and doing interviews like this, I'm a karate teacher. I teach martial arts 3 days a week to kids. And I love doing that. And I love teaching kids and helping them with things and such. So, no, I like people. People are cool.
Awesome.
Which is good because the world's full of them. So
too many sometimes, I think.
They're kind of everywhere. So
yeah, I know.
I also live in one of the most densely populated cities in the world. So
there you go. Yeah.
So
kind of
read into that what you will.
Kind of liking people by force. Yeah. I know a lot of people that
I could very easily move out of the city. I don't wanna. I like it here. So I'm in the right place for myself.
Somebody in the chat room said, "Wait, a writer can be an extrovert? What?"
Yeah,
no way. That's impossible.
And some of us are. Trust me. We're kind of nuts, actually.
Yeah, I've always said I'm an introvert living an extrovert's lifestyle. I interact with people I don't necessarily like to, but I'm out here, right? Yeah. But when it comes to writing, a writer. I think a lot of people that are writers, they have this idea in mind that they can just sit in the corner and, write their book, smoking their cigarettes or whatever the case may be, drinking booze, and they, they have this image in their mind of what that is, right? And that they don't have to deal with people because they're just going to sit and write. And yet with writers, I mean, in order to really be successful as a professional writer, you've got to be out there speaking to people and introducing to people and, pitching to people and all this kind of stuff all the time, right?
To some extent, yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's perfectly possible to be a writer and be an introvert. Trust me, I know plenty of them. But the trick is finding the right balance for yourself. Right. I mean, you have to interact with people to some extent. But it's also very easy to interact with people and not actually do it directly between, telephones, emails, texts, whatnot. You can interact with people without actually leaving your house. So
Yeah, the internet's definitely facilitated that.
yeah. I mean, there is value in pitching in person, but it's not always practical for everybody anyway.
Right.
So, it's perfectly possible to stay hidden in your house with your family and your cats or whatever, and still have a good, successful, productive writing career.
Right. Now that leads me to a sideline question. Then I see that you have done.
Yes, I have cats.
I think most writers do. I've seen that you've done some work as far as Kickstarter goes, like some different things there. What do you think about doing that? Do you think that that's been a really good experience for you, or would you do it again? I mean, what's been your experiences with that?
I plan to do it again. No, it's been great. I've only done Kickstarters specifically for stories in my Dragon Precinct universe, the fantasy police procedural I mentioned earlier. It's been a great way to do new stories in that universe. For the stories aren't like huge sellers or anything. I'm doing them through the small press, but they have a dedicated audience, and because of that, it's enough to support a Kickstarter, so that if people want to get a short story, they can, and that's useful. It's a fun thing to do. It gives me a chance to write more stories in the universe for an audience who I know will be receptive to it. It's also how I wound up, because I'm in the midst of a little craziness with my publisher right now. So I did a Kickstarter to support the 5th book in the series, which will be out this fall, Mermaid Precinct. And that's gone very well also. And it's a very good way to get your work out to an audience that will appreciate it and still actually, I mean, I'm a freelance writer. The reason it's not the only reason. I mean, the reason I write as opposed to something else is because I enjoy it. But I also am trying to make a living here, and I have this eating habit I can't kick, and my landlord insists on the rent once a month, whether they need it or not. So, because of that, I kind of need to get paid. So, for that reason, I need to. I need to find some other alternate ways of monetizing this, as it were. And this works. The people, I get the financial support, and they get exactly what I tell them they're going to get, which is a story plus whatever rewards we throw in there.
Right.
And that's it's a really good way to do creative work, so that you'll know it'll find an audience. And without, the same level of risk that a publisher might have to take for things. So I think it's a really wonderful method of doing creative work. I know it's been a huge boon to the gaming business. There's a lot of games that have been done that way.
Yeah, a lot of them that wouldn't exist without it, for sure. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and that's important.
It's interesting, though. The reason why I ask is it's interesting because you're one of the few writers that I've seen doing it successfully. I've seen other people that have tried to do it, but didn't really get any support.
Oh, I've had my failures too. I tried to do a Dragon Precinct graphic novel, and I didn't even. I not only didn't make my funding goal, I wasn't even in any danger of making my funding goal. That was a complete. I mean, there were 3 different aspects to the funding, and it was basically paying the artist, paying me, and the production costs. I didn't even make the production costs.
Ah, wow.
And so that showed me that there are limits as to what I can actually accomplish here. Also, creating a graphic novel is expensive as hell. And I could have gone for a lesser goal and not paid myself, but I still wouldn't have been able. I had to, the artist. I had to pay the artist. The artist isn't going to do the work if they're not going to get paid. So that, and I can't do the production work myself, so I don't have those skills. So I at the very least needed the money to pay for those 2 things. I didn't even make it that far. So that was instructive. That was something there's not enough of an audience to support that, or at least not yet. And that could change again. I may take another shot at it, or I may just do the story as prose, because that seems to be where the franchise works at its best.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I've had failures too. It's tough, and you don't know what's going to succeed and what's going to fail. I've seen plenty that have really crashed and burned. And I've seen ones that I didn't think anybody would care about that wound up, getting 300% funded or whatever. So, you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Now, with fan fiction, would you be offended if people wrote fan fiction based in your universe that you've created? Or
God, no.
Yeah.
I'd have to pretend not to notice it for legal reasons. But I would very quietly be thrilled.
Gotcha. Yeah, I know there's a lot of really weird areas when it comes to the legalities of the fan fiction. So I didn't know, some people might feel a little bit offended that they're trying to, put that out there.
I totally understand why people would, and I don't blame them in the least. I mean, to be completely blunt, fan fiction is illegal, period.
Right. Yeah.
The reason why it generally is not prosecuted as much as it might be is because people are generally willing to turn a blind eye as long as no profit is being made off of it. Which there generally isn't with fanfic. One of the reasons why there was that whole flap in the Star Trek fan film community was because somebody wanted to do a fan film in order to actually make a profit off their studio, not just and using the Star Trek brand in order to create that profit, and that was the problem.
Right.
Every other fan film that had asked for support was doing it purely to feed it back into the production of Star Trek fan films. Nobody was actually making a profit off of the brand. And what caused the recent flap and what caused the people who produced the Axanar fan film to get sued was their raising money to open a studio that would be used for things other than Star Trek fan films. And that was using the brand, the Star Trek brand, in order to create a profit for somebody other than the people who own it. And that's where the problem happens. Like I said, I would, as long as nobody's trying to make money off my IP, I'd be fine with it. If somebody, writes fiction based on, Dragon Precinct or Super City Cops or something and then tries to sell it and make money off it, then I have a problem. But if they just, wrote something and put it up on their website, I would be honored about that thing I didn't actually see.
Yeah. Gotcha. Katie, you got any other questions? We're starting to run a little short here.
Oh, no, I'm all good. I'm just enjoying the show right now.
Well, thank you.
Keith has been awesome, that's for sure. Keith has been awesome, that's for sure. I'll tell you what, to me, this has been just a really good experience to interact with an author that's had a lot of experience in the industry. I mean, you're definitely a prolific writer. I mean, 50 plus novels out there.
It's funny. That people say that and it still catches me off guard. I don't think of myself as being, a veteran in the industry, even though obviously I am. I've been doing this, in some form or other since I graduated college in 1990. And it was weird. A couple of years ago, I was at a convention in Colorado Springs. It was me and 6 other writers, and it was a how to break into the industry panel. And we started by each of us told the story of how we sold our first piece of fiction. And I was appalled to realize that I was the only person on that panel who broke in the 20th century. Everybody else, their first sale was in 2001 or later.
Gotcha, yeah.
And it's like, wait a minute, when did I turn into a grizzled veteran? What the hell? I don't think of myself as being that old.
I totally understand
I'm going to turn 50 in 2 years, and it's like, yeah, okay.
I totally understand that. How you transitioned.
You know what they say, you're only as old as the person you feel. So.
Exactly. You transitioned into freelancing mid-90s, right? Mid to late 90s.
Late 90s, 98, yeah. 1998.
Okay, so when you did that, how scared were you to do that? To go from
one part. A little bit, but I had one distinct. I had a couple of advantages when I did do it. I already had 2 novel sales under my belt with another couple that were in negotiation. I had at the time a spouse who made a 6-figure salary, which was one of the reasons why I was willing to try it when I did.
Gotcha.
And I had one regular freelance gig already set up that involved. It was basically a freelance version of the job I already had. I was working as a salaried employee for Byron Price. I wanted to go freelance, and Byron didn't particularly want me to do it, but I said the alternative was I quit completely. And since I was the one editor in charge of his most profitable project, he went along with it. And I continued to basically edit that project, and I came in 2 days a week and did that for a set amount of money per week. And I took on other projects for him on a case-by-case basis. That helped. The fact that I had one guaranteed steady stream of income no matter what, and the fact that I had the backup of my wife at the time. So I went into it with, a pretty good foundation in place to build on. And it worked out. The first year was a little rough, but by the second year, I was making more money as a freelancer than I had been as a salaried employee. And that continued to be true for about 10 years until the crash in 2008. And then the 2 years after that were pretty crappy. But things have gotten better again. So, it's worked out well for me, which is good because I suck at working in offices.
Yeah, you and me both.
that is not one of my superpowers. So I thrive better in this type of environment. So. Yeah, not everyone does. But,
you and me both.
And I know plenty of people who suck at being freelance, because they're better suited to having external order imposed upon them. I hate having external order imposed upon me, but other people are much better at it. So
that's how I am too. It's to me very scary to be salaried, to have that thing imposed upon me, fitting into whatever pattern. I like to do my own thing and wake up in the morning scared to death that the bills are going to get paid sometimes, but that happens sometimes, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That happens no matter what industry you're in though. So it's not exclusive to writers. But Katie, I know you're still hanging out there, but we're pretty short on time here. I'm going to go ahead and let you go here, but thanks for calling in tonight.
Well, thanks for letting me join in the conversation, and best of luck to you, Keith.
Thank you. You too.
Talk to you soon, Katie.
Bye.
Keith, here at the end, we've got just a couple of minutes that are left here. I want to go ahead and give you a chance to get out anything that you like, a message that you'd like to get out, final words from Keith or whatever the case may be. And also make sure that you give out your web address and where people can find you again.
Like I said, DeCandido.net. That's my last name.net. DeCandido.net. That is a gateway to my entire online footprint. I'm easily findable on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, and I have a blog which is on WordPress. It's decandido.wordpress.com. I have a monthly podcast called Dead Kitchen Radio, which is available on iTunes, and I also have a site for that, which is deadkitchenradio.wordpress.com. The title is actually, it's an anagram of Keith R.A. DeCandido. And I talk about, various bits of my work, and I do readings of my fiction there. And that's really the best place to find me. That if you go to decandido.net, you can seek me out there and find me fairly easily. And I natter about all sorts of different things online. I try to keep myself entertaining online. And I've got lots of new stuff that's out. Most recently, this month, actually, neither of them are out yet, but they will be this month. The third book in my Tales of Asgard trilogy, which are based on the Marvel superheroes, Thor, Sif, and the Warriors 3. The Thor and the Sif books are already out. The Warriors 3 book will be out this month. It's called Godhood's End. And that's a novel that'll be out from Joe Books. I've also got an anthology coming out later this month called TV Gods Summer Programming, which is about gods appearing on television. And I've got a story in that. I was in an aliens anthology that Titan recently put out, edited by Jonathan Mayberry, called Bug Hunt. And I wrote a story in there called Deep Background, which also has a bunch of stories by a lot of really cool science fiction, fantasy, and horror writers. There's also Baker Street Irregulars, which is an anthology of alternative Sherlock Holmes stories that I've got. I mentioned before, Shirley Holmes and Jack Watson. There's a story with them in there. I'm working on A Furnace Sealed, which is the urban fantasy taking place in the Bronx. That'll be out later this year, I hope. Also out later this year, I hope, is Mermaid, the latest in my fantasy police procedural series. There's the Super City Cops novellas, which are available online as ebooks. All that good stuff. And I'm still writing. I've got an Orphan Black book coming out later this year that I had so much fun with. It's called Classified Clone Report, and it's being put out by Inside Editions, and it'll be reports, emails, diary entries, transcripts, and newspaper articles, all sorts of stuff relating to Orphan Black. It's coming out simultaneous with the release of the final season of the show, which will start in June on BBC America, and it's tremendous fun. I had a great time with that book. So yeah, and I'm still writing for Toy.com. I'm doing a Star Trek: The Original Series rewatch, and I'll be doing soon a long-term overview of comic book superheroes that have been made into live-action films. So starting with like the old Superman and Batman movies and going all the way through to the current Marvel Cinematic Universe and the DC movies and all that stuff. So
awesome, Keith. Awesome. I definitely appreciate you coming on with me tonight. And I want to thank you so much. I mean, this has just been a great conversation. I love it.
Thank you.
I will let you go, and I will make sure that you are linked up on our website, on the archive of this show, as well as over on the archive for YouTube as well, so people can just click there and get to your website as well. So thank you so much for being here with us tonight, Keith. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Keep yourself safe. So there you guys go, Keith DeCandido. And I'll tell you what, this has been great. I love this guy. He's awesome. He's amazing. Works. And make sure you guys check him out. He's everywhere. Again, you can just do a quick search on the search engine of your choice, and you're going to find all kinds of stuff from him. So he's very prolific. But anyways, we'll let you go here, and hopefully you guys enjoyed the show tonight as much as I did. If you want to go to the archive of this show, it's going to be over on our website, openeyesnetwork.com. You guys can also find it on YouTube at youtube.com/C/openeyesnetwork. If you guys want to see any of my own writings, you guys can check out my website, originalworlds.com. I have all of my books available for sale there, as well as short stories that I'm, letting you guys read for free and all that kind of good stuff. So check that out, originalworlds.com. I will be back tonight, probably at midnight, with Duct Tape Nation. Joe's going to be live tonight, so make sure you guys tune in for that. And yeah, it should be a pretty good show. I'll probably be on as a little voice in your ear as well. We will also be back again Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as well as Sunday with Money and Change at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Until next time, keep safe out there, have fun, and thank you so much, as always, for listening.